The first sign was not the lights. It was the silence in the conveyors. A warehouse has a sound that never stops when the shift is running right. Motors, rollers, the steady slap of stretch wrap. Forklifts backing out with the warning beeper. Someone laughing near the lockers, the hiss of the dock levelers. Tonight I had that sound for maybe 20 minutes. Then the building gave a small shudder and everything went uneven. The overhead lights flickered once, then twice, then stayed on but dimmed enough that faces looked wrong. A second later the conveyors stopped mid-run, and a pallet on the incline just sat there, stuck, wrapped tight, labels facing the ceiling. I checked my handheld scanner and the screen went black. I checked my phone and saw no signal, no data, no nothing. Then the phone froze for a second and came back with the time still ticking, which meant the device was fine and the network was not. I was the night shift manager at a distribution warehouse on the western edge of Rotterdam. Close enough to the port that you can smell the river some nights and hear container trucks even through the closed doors. We moved medical supplies, packaged food, spare parts, boring goods that keep the city quiet and working. Boring goods turn important fast when a region goes dark. I walked the main aisle toward the security office because the security office had the generator panel, the landline, and the old emergency radio cabinet nobody touched unless a forklift caught fire or a truck driver showed up bleeding. People followed me with their eyes. That part never changes. In any workplace, when the routine breaks, everyone looks for a person who acts certain. I kept my voice low and normal and told the nearest team lead, "Samir, freeze picking. Park the equipment. Bring everyone to the break area. Head count now." Samir nodded and went, moving fast without drama. The overhead lights blinked again, then the emergency lights clicked on, dim and yellow, and the warehouse turned into a long tunnel of shadowed racks and shrink-wrap glare. I passed a forklift sitting half-turned in an aisle, forks still raised. I waved the driver down and told him to set the load and shut it off. He looked at me with that question people ask without words, the one that says, "Is this just a power hiccup?" I did not answer the question. I kept moving. The generator did not start on its own. That was my first real problem. The system is set to auto-start when mains drop. It did nothing. I reached the panel, flipped the cover, and saw the fault light. I pressed the manual start and heard the starter grind through the wall. Slow, then fast, then it caught. The vibration came up through the concrete slab into my shoes. The transfer switch clunked, and a few circuits came back. Not everything. The big refrigeration bank stayed off, the conveyor drive stayed off, and most of the office equipment stayed dead. The radio cabinet lit up and the landline had dial tone. That was enough. I checked the diesel gauge for the generator tank, then checked the binder that sat next to it with laminated pages and dusty tabs. Fuel on the gauge read just under 3/4. In normal life, that meant nothing. Tonight, it meant a timer. I keyed the mic on the old radio and tried to keep it simple. Industrial site, West Rotterdam. Power loss across our area. Anyone else on emergency channel? Confirm. I let go and expected a few port security voices, maybe a yard manager, maybe a trucker. I got a response immediately, a man with a tight voice and a Dutch accent. Port side. He said the Maasvlakte gates were down, cranes stopped mid-lift, and some of the yard lighting never came back. He said the port control rooms were on backup but had comms issues. He said traffic signals on the A15 were dark, and he had already heard of 2 crashes near a merge ramp. He said the outage hit hard and wide, no rolling brownout, no neighborhood flicker. One drop, then unstable. I asked him if he had an estimate. He said nobody had an estimate. He said the grid operator lines were jammed. He said emergency services were already stretched and it had been less than half an hour. In the break area, my staff stood around with jackets on, phones out, faces lit by screens that showed nothing useful. We had 32 people on shift. I counted twice. Samir counted 2. No one missing. That was the first win of the night. I told everyone to stay inside, no solo trips to cars, no one opening dock doors, no one trying to leave yet. I said it plainly. No streetlights, no traffic control, no trains, no fuel pumps. Leaving right now is risk. A few people argued, a few people begged. One guy tried to push past me toward the exit, and Samir stepped in and blocked him with his body. No violence, no shouting, just a hard stop. I told them we would reassess after 1 hour. I said that because humans can handle 1 hour. Humans break when you tell them, "I do not know." The channel filled up fast. A yard supervisor from Antwerp said the ring road was jammed and the tunnel ventilation fans were off, so authorities were closing entrances. A woman from Brussels said the metro stopped, and people were walking through stations by phone light. A man from Lille said the industrial parks were black, and the motorway signs were dead. Another voice, German, said Berlin dropped to darkness in minutes, not a local outage, a citywide failure. Then a voice from Paris cut in, and my stomach tightened because Paris is not a neighbor to Rotterdam in any practical sense. The woman in Paris said there were no streetlights, the sirens were constant, and she could see smoke toward the outer ring. She said mobile networks were not functioning. She said people were already smashing shop windows, not waiting for morning. People were moving with purpose, not confusion. That detail mattered. Confused crowds behave one way, purposeful groups behave another. I tried my phone again, then again. Nothing. I called my girlfriend through the landline. It rang, then failed. I called my mother in The Hague. No connection. The landline had dial tone, but no reliable routing. That told me parts of the telephone's switching chain were offline. Some exchanges have batteries and generators, but not all. Some sites rely on remote power feeds that were now dead. I put the phone down and felt the first hard hit of isolation. No news, no confirmation, no simple way to check the outside world. If you grow up in the Netherlands, you get used to systems working even when you complain about them. Tonight, the system was not working. A man came on the radio who sounded different. He said he was a utility contractor working near a substation in South Holland. He did not name the location. He said he was on scene because his crew got called when the first alarms hit. He said the failure was not clean. He said a perimeter fence was cut, not bent, cut. He said a cabinet door had pry marks. He said he could smell burned insulation. He said the outage looked physical, not only electrical. He did not use the word sabotage. He did not need to. My throat went dry. A grid can collapse from overload, storm, or equipment failure. Cut fences and damaged cabinets belong to a different category. About 40 minutes in, an American voice came through, and the room around me went quiet because it sounded wrong, too far away. The man spoke fast, controlled, with a Boston accent. He said Boston. Massachusetts was dark. He said the Seaport district had no power, and he had seen smoke near an electrical yard. He said Logan Airport was running on backup and had suspended departures. He said cellular networks dropped fast. He said he was using a portable transceiver from a rooftop because he did not trust any official channel to stay up. He said he was hearing European voices, and he did not understand why, but he was not turning his equipment off. I did not care why. I cared that someone was building a bridge across a blackout. I keyed up and told him he was heard in the Netherlands and that Europe was dark too. From that moment, the channel stopped being a work tool and became a live map of collapse. Berlin reported traffic gridlock at dead intersections, then a surge of people on foot. London reported partial outages and rolling drops, with the underground stopped in sections and tunnels filling with stranded passengers. Madrid reported heat building in apartments because fans and air conditioners were dead, and people were moving to the streets. Montreal reported cold, below freezing, and building hallway lights dying when small backup batteries drained. Someone from Warsaw said the main station was full of people with nowhere to go. Someone from Hamburg said the port cranes were frozen in place and that fuel deliveries were halted. Every report carried the same spine of facts: power off, communications unstable, movement disrupted. I did what I always do under pressure. I built rules. I told callers to identify city and only share what he or she saw, not what social media said, because social media was dead anyway. I told my staff to inventory basic supplies without opening the high-value cages. We pulled bottled water from a pallet in the break room storage. We pulled first aid kits. We pulled reflective vests, gloves, flashlights, spare batteries, and an old paper map book from the security drawer. I told Samir to lock all dock doors and leave only one personnel door active, controlled from inside. I told another lead, Marieke, to check the fire suppression pump room and confirm the pump power source and valve position, because a warehouse fire during a blackout becomes an uncontrolled disaster in minutes. Marieke came back and said the fire pump controller was on mains and did not transfer to generator power. That was a problem we could solve. I told her to stay with Samir, and we went together to the pump room to see if there was a manual bypass circuit. We found none. We had sprinklers, but the booster pump would not run if pressure dropped. On the radio, the Boston man, Chris, described a substation flare. He said he heard loud pops, saw a bright flash, then a roar of fire. He said firefighters arrived but had low water pressure from hydrants. He said the crews started drafting water from the harbor. That detail lined up with what my own brain was calculating about water systems. Pump stations need electricity. Treatment plants need electricity. Pressure can hold for a while in elevated tanks, then it drops, Then it becomes a citywide health crisis. In Berlin, a man said he saw small fires at telecom cabinets, not huge blazes, targeted burns, and he said he watched men in reflective vests near a fenced electrical yard before the lights went out. He assumed maintenance. He said the gates were open later with no marked vehicles. The same tactic repeated in Boston and Berlin. That was not a coincidence I could ignore. A man with a crisp voice came on from the United States and said he was National Guard, Massachusetts. He did not give a unit designation. He used military time in letter form, speaking in terms of 0100 and 0230. He said his convoy was being routed to water treatment and major electrical yards because multiple sites were damaged by intrusion and arson. He said law enforcement was overwhelmed and communications were degraded. He said he could not confirm Europe, but he was hearing it through private relays. I asked him, calm, direct, "Do you see coordination?" He paused, then said yes. He said multiple sites, similar methods, cabinet damage, fires, and signs of deliberate disablement of backup systems. He said people were not just taking advantage of darkness, people were blocking recovery. I turned the volume down and looked at my staff. Some were shaking, some were angry, some looked empty, sitting on the floor with backs to the wall, staring at a phone that showed nothing. My job turned from logistics to containment. I told them the plain truth without drama. This is not a 1-hour outage. We are staying here for the rest of the night. We keep quiet. We keep together and we do not become a beacon. I moved everyone from the main break area to a deeper interior room with fewer windows. I shut off non-essential lights on the generator circuit. I covered the security office window using cardboard and a roll of stretch film so no light leaked outside. I hated doing it. I did it anyway. Near 2 a.m, Rotterdam time, the first direct threat arrived at our site. A vehicle rolled slowly past our entrance gate, headlights off, moving only on the small glow of the dashboard. It stopped near the fence line and 2 figures got out. I saw it because one of our exterior cameras was on a small uninterruptible power supply, a leftover from a security upgrade project. That uninterruptible power supply was not meant for hours. It was meant for minutes. It was still running. The figures wore reflective vests. That detail made my skin tighten. I watched the camera feed and saw one man test the fence with a hand, then pull something from his pocket that looked like cutters. I did not go outside. I did not confront. I keyed the radio and told anyone in the Rotterdam port area that unknown men were at my fence. Reflective vests, attempting entry. I asked if port security could dispatch a patrol. The port security voice answered that his patrol units were already stretched and that he was receiving similar reports from multiple sites. Similar reports. I shut down the camera monitor to conserve power, then brought it back briefly to check again. The men were gone. That did not calm me. It made it worse. It meant he had either moved somewhere the camera did not see, or he was testing our response. I told Samir and Marieke to position 2 forklifts in front of the interior side of the personnel door corridor, not touching the door, just creating a barrier that forced any intruder into a choke point. We had no firearms. We had metal, hard hats, and tools. I told everyone to stay quiet. I told everyone to keep shoes on and keep a flashlight within reach. I did not say, "I am scared." I did not need to. Everyone knew the stakes by then. The radio carried a new kind of report from Berlin. A local clinic generator had been attacked. Not stolen, not looted for fuel, attacked for disablement. A man said someone cut the fuel line and set a small fire to the generator cabinet, then left without taking medicine. That detail hit hard. It meant the target was not goods. The target was function. In Boston, Chris reported a hospital maintenance worker said the day tank for a building generator ran dry because the transfer pump that refills it depends on mains power and the bypass system did not work. That was a realistic failure mode. In Montreal, a woman reported apartment emergency lights died after a few hours and stairwells became dangerous. Reports stacked into a pattern I could not dismiss. The attacks were not random. The failure cascade was being pushed. Close to dawn, a smooth voice entered the channel and spoke in English with a neutral accent. The voice said, "Stop transmitting. Power restoration is underway. Stay inside. Do not gather." Then the voice repeated the message in French, then in German. The phrasing sounded official on purpose. The voice gave no location, no verification, no reference to any authority. It gave commands and moved on. That was the moment I understood our channel was being monitored by someone who wanted it silent. A random opportunist does not police multilingual traffic in a transatlantic blackout. Someone with planning does. People argued back on the channel, shouting, demanding identity. threatening. I cut in and told everyone to keep reports factual. No rumor as fact, no addresses, no emotional chanting. I said it in a tired voice because the night had already carved a hollow inside my chest. When daylight arrived, it brought no relief. Rotterdam stayed dark. The distant skyline had no normal glow. There was a smoke to the south. A gray column that could be industrial, could be residential, could be anything. The traffic noise on the highway was low and uneven. The port security voice reported a fire at a telecom switching point near the port perimeter, and he said it looked set, cabinet open, then burned. He said he was watching crews attempt to repair with hand tools and portable lights, while others guarded the perimeter with batons and one rifle. In Berlin, the firefighter woman reported the same thing. Repeated. Small targeted cabinet fires timed to stretch crews thin. In Boston, Chris described men in identical work jackets moving near a manhole access by a telecom junction, then leaving fast when confronted. He did not claim proof. He said it did not look normal. I faced a hard decision that morning. A warehouse can shelter, but it is also a prize. If anyone learned we had generator power, light, and water, the building could become a magnet. I could keep everyone here and risk becoming a target. Or I could release people and risk losing them to streets that were becoming unstable. I chose a controlled release. I let people who lived within walking distance leave in pairs, reflective vests off. No bright flashlights pointed outward, with one sealed bottle of water each, and a paper note with the warehouse landline number written out. I kept my core crew, the calm workers, the first aid trained staff, Samir and Marieke, and anyone with nowhere safe to go. I told everyone who left to avoid main intersections and avoid crowds, to take side routes, to keep heads down, and to come back only if his home was unsafe. I hated the words coming out of my mouth because they sounded like advice from a disaster movie. The streets outside made them real. The second night was worse because the first shock had turned into anger. People on the radio started reporting block groups forming, some protective, some predatory. In the outskirts of Paris, a woman described a stairwell group demanding payment for access to a shared water supply point. In Berlin, a man described a roadblock run by men in work jackets carrying rifles. No police markings, stopping cars, asking questions, taking radios. He said one man got taken away. He watched from a distance and did not intervene. He sounded ashamed and also alive. In Boston, Chris described a fuel station with dead pumps being controlled by a small armed group using manual siphon rigs and selling fuel for cash or food. He said police were not stopping it. He said he did not know if police could even coordinate. I kept my own broadcast grounded because I could feel paranoia rising in the channel. I told listeners what was confirmable about power restoration. A utility contractor on the channel explained Black Start in plain terms. He said a large grid does not come back from a single switch. Plants trip to protect equipment. To restart, you need Black Start generation, then you energize lines carefully, then you synchronize frequency, then you rebuild load section by section. He said high voltage transformers are large, custom units, and replacement takes months under normal conditions. He said if multiple transformers were damaged deliberately, the timeline stretches. He said this was not fear talk. He said it was physics, manufacturing, and transport. He was right. That is the kind of detail that does not care about politics or optimism. In my own building, the generator became my enemy and my lifeline. I began measuring consumption by hours. We reduced loads again. We shut off all non-essential circuits. We ran the radio cabinet and one low light in the office, a small fan in the generator room, and nothing else. We stopped charging phones except for brief scheduled windows, rotating one device at a time, low brightness, airplane mode, 15 minutes, then off. We moved food into the coolest interior corner to slow spoilage. We discussed the refrigeration bank and decided not to run it on generator because the compressor surge load could trip the generator under the current fuel and maintenance conditions, and a tripped generator in the middle of the night would invite disaster. We checked the fuel filters and oil level. We cleaned the air intake screen. We treated the generator as a patient that could die at any moment. On day 2, we had our first breach attempt, the same pattern. Reflective vests, quiet movement. 2 men at the fence line again, this time on the camera that was running on the uninterruptible power supply's last life. One man cut the fence clean, folded it back, and stepped through. He did not run. He did not rush. He moved with confidence. He approached a side door that led to our maintenance corridor, a door that normally stays locked and ignored. He tried the handle, locked. He looked up and scanned. That scan told me he was trained. I did not confront. I did not send my people outside. I used the radio and asked the port security voice if any patrol was near our sector. He said a patrol vehicle was moving toward a transformer fire near a rail spur and would not detour unless lives were at risk. He said to shelter in place. Shelter in place was what we were already doing. I made the next decision fast. I cut our interior lights completely and moved everyone deeper inside. I shut down the office monitor to remove any screen glow. I told everyone to stay silent. The warehouse became a closed mouth. I listened for sound through the walls, footfalls, metal scraping, door rattles. We heard nothing. 10 minutes later, Marieke heard a faint clink near the maintenance corridor door from inside the building. The sound of someone testing a lock. Samir and I moved to the corner with flashlights off, using the shadow. I could hear my own breathing, controlled, shallow. The door handle moved once, then again, then stopped. A minute later, we heard a soft thump, maybe a shoulder check, then nothing. We stayed still for 15 minutes. Then the door handle moved again, then stopped. Then a set of footsteps moved away. No shouting, no drama. The intruder did not get in. The intruder learned we had barriers and silence. Silence can look empty from outside. That was my goal. The third day brought a new kind of information. Patrick, the relay operator in Dublin, said he was hearing coastal reports about undersea cable landing sites. He did not present it as fact. He said multiple callers in different coastal regions described forced entry at fenced compounds that house cable landing equipment and local repeaters, plus small fires, plus damaged backup systems. He explained in plain terms that global data moves mainly through undersea fiber cables and that the landings are choke points. He said you do not need to cut the ocean. You cut the gateways. If that was happening alongside substation attacks, it explained the sudden collapse of both power control coordination and telecommunications. It also explained why rumors were multiplying, because verification was dead. Chris in Boston reported a printed notice at a checkpoint claiming authority, offering protection services in exchange for cooperation, supplies, and information. He said it looked professionally printed, not scribbled. He described a clean logo with no recognizable government markings. In Berlin, another caller described the same thing. Printed notices, identical language, different city. The match was too close. Printed material does not appear spontaneously in multiple cities on the same night. That was the first piece that made my stomach harden into something close to certainty. Someone planned messaging for a crisis. Someone planned to step into the vacuum with a script. By then, my own broadcast shifted. I stopped sharing anything that could identify our exact location. I stopped saying Rotterdam and started saying an industrial site in the Netherlands. I told callers to avoid sharing addresses. I told listeners a basic rule. Uniforms and vests mean nothing now unless a person can verify identity with something checkable. I cautioned against becoming a gang while forming a neighborhood watch. I said it plainly. Defend your entrance, help your neighbors, do not start hunting strangers for sport. I could hear the sharpness in my own voice, and I did not apologize for it. Fear turns into cruelty, fast, when people feel permission. I did not want my voice to be part of that permission. On day 3, I made a trip into Rotterdam with Samir and Farid, one of my workers who had left and returned the previous day. We went because I needed to find my girlfriend, and because I needed to see the streets with my own eyes instead of listening to distant voices. We took the warehouse van, low profile, doors locked, windows up, no bright interior lights. The road network was a mess. Intersections were clogged with abandoned cars, some with doors open, some with hazards still blinking until batteries died. People were directing traffic with hand gestures in some places. In other places, drivers pushed through with horn blasts and anger. We passed a telecom cabinet burned open, metal skin peeled back. We passed a supermarket with shattered glass and a line of people arguing with 2 men holding metal bars across the entrance. We did not stop. We passed a police car parked sideways with no officer in sight. We saw a checkpoint near a bridge approach run by men in work jackets and reflective strips. 1 man holding a rifle in 5.56. No police markings, no official vehicle. We turned off 2 streets early and took a longer route. Pride is a way to die. My girlfriend met me on the 2nd floor landing of her building with a backpack already packed. She looked tired in a way that went past sleep loss. She said the neighbors were cooperating, but tension was building and someone tried the building door at night. She said the courtyard water tap had slowed to a trickle and people were starting to argue about who deserved what. She did not ask permission. She said, "We go now." We went. No speeches, no long goodbye. 2 neighbors nodded at her. then at me. One man said, "Stay safe." That was all. We moved fast, quiet, and got back to the van. We returned to the warehouse by a different route and made it through without being stopped. I did not interpret that as safety. I interpreted it as luck. The fourth day opened with an attempted restoration that failed across several reported areas. Utrecht reported power returning for about 20 minutes, then dropping again. Parts of London reported rolling restoration in one zone, then failure. A utility voice explained what failure can mean: mismatched load, unstable frequency, protective relays tripping, or damaged transmission corridors preventing synchronization. He said restoration is delicate, and if someone is still attacking key nodes, the best operators in the world cannot stabilize a network. That matched what Berlin reported next: another substation yard fire seen from a distance. Heat so intense, nobody approached. The firefighter woman said crews were being told to focus on life safety, not infrastructure, because the infrastructure sites were becoming ambush points for fuel theft and equipment theft. Then my own site took a hit that forced a decision. Around late afternoon, someone opened the generator room exterior vent panel and poured something into the intake area. I did not see him do it. I saw the result. The generator RPM shifted, the exhaust note changed, and the panel flashed a warning. Samir and I rushed to the generator room and smelled fuel, not normal diesel exhaust, raw fuel odor mixed with something sharper. We shut down the generator before it could grenade itself. The warehouse went dark. The radio cabinet stayed alive on its internal backup for a short window. We used flashlights and kept people calm. In the intake area, we found a rag stuffed into the vent and a smear of oil on the mesh. Someone had tried to choke the generator. That was not theft. That was disablement. I felt cold rage. Someone had been close enough to touch our lifeline. Someone had watched our perimeter, found the vulnerable point, and acted. We had two options: restart and risk damage, or stay dark and silent and preserve the equipment for a controlled start after cleaning. I chose to clean first. We pulled the vent mesh, wiped everything down with rags, checked the air filter, checked the fuel line, checked the oil level, checked the coolant. Marieki read the generator manual by flashlight and confirmed the fault code indicated airflow restriction. We got lucky. If the attacker had poured grit into the intake, we could have damaged cylinders. If he had cut the fuel line, we could have lost the engine to fire. This looked deliberate but not fully destructive. It was still terrifying. It meant someone was testing our resilience. I restarted the generator after an hour of checks, with everyone still silent in the interior. It caught and settled, and we brought back only the radio and one small light. We stayed dark beyond that. That night, I spoke more carefully on the radio and less often. I told listeners that our site had been targeted. Generator sabotage attempt, no confrontation, no injuries, and I told anyone running generator power to harden vents and access points. I described our fix in plain terms. I said, cover intake vents with secured mesh, lock exterior panels, check for rags, check for deliberate obstruction. I also said out loud what I had been resisting. Someone is not only using the blackout, someone is prolonging it. I did not name a group. I did not speculate on motives beyond control and destabilization. I did not feed rumors. I stuck to pattern and observed behavior. Chris in Boston reported something matching my generator attack. He said a neighborhood clinic had its generator fuel siphoned at night, then someone cut the refuel hose. He said the clinic did not lose medicine to looting. It lost function. Berlin reported the same. Paris reported water stations being vandalized. In Montreal, Elise reported apartment emergency generators being stripped of batteries. The guard voice in Massachusetts said his unit was now assigned to guard not only substations but also fuel depots and generator sites, because attacks were shifting to backup systems. That confirmed an escalation. Phase 1 hit the grid, Phase 2 hit the backups. Phase 3 would be control of distribution. On day 5, the smooth command voice returned and tried a different approach. The voice said, "Aid distribution points will be announced. Stay off the air. This channel spreads panic." Then the voice repeated the message in German and French. Again, no verification, no details. Patrick cut in from Dublin and asked one calm question. Name one location. Name one authority. Name one time. The smooth voice did not answer. It left. That exchange mattered because it showed a simple method to strip authority from a false official tone. Calm verification, not argument, not threats. Verification. By then, my warehouse had turned into a small shelter with rules. We assigned watches in 4-hour blocks, posted at the personnel door corridor and near the generator room. We established a water ration plan using measured bottles, one per person per day, plus small amounts for cleaning wounds and washing hands. We began collecting rainwater in clean containers from roof drain points, then filtering through cloth, then boiling small batches on a camping stove someone kept in his car. We created a latrine system using lined bins and absorbent materials, sealed and stored away from food. None of that felt heroic. It felt humiliating, the way adults feel when forced back into basic survival. Still, it worked. We kept sickness away, we kept fights away, we kept fear managed through routine. Outside, reports sharpened. Berlin described checkpoints expanding, printed notices, organized crews. Boston described armed neighborhood groups and private security for payment. Paris described fires set to reduce food availability, not only to loot. London described hospital triage points being set up at schools and community centers. The Guard voice in Massachusetts described water distribution under armed protection. A utility voice in Germany said high-voltage direct current links between regions were being used to stabilize small islands of power, but sabotage made those links unreliable. He explained the European synchronization system in simple terms, referencing the European network of transmission system operators for electricity and how cross-border stability relies on frequency and phase alignment. He said if enough key nodes were damaged, stable synchronization could not be maintained across the full footprint. That meant the continent could fracture into isolated pockets of power, each defending its own stability. That was not drama, that was grid math. I wrestled with a dangerous thought and said it out loud only once, carefully. A blackout does not need to be permanent to change everything. If someone can break trust for 1 week, the social order changes. I challenged my own thought too, because I did not want to become a man who sees only villains. I said some fires will be accidents. Some violence will be ordinary crime. Do not turn every shadow into a planned operation. I also said, cut fences and repeated attacks on substations and cable sites across continents do not happen from coincidence. Both statements can be true. A crisis can be layered. A campaign can exist inside a chaos field. Opportunists can ride a wave created by someone else. On day 6, we got our first real restoration in our sector, brief and unstable. A distant industrial park came back in patches. We saw a few building lights flick on far across a canal, then blink and drop. The radio lit up with voices reporting the same thing in other cities. A flicker of return, then failure. The utility contractor voice said that kind of flicker can happen when operators energize a line and the load surge trips protection, or when damaged equipment arcs under re-energization. He said it can also happen if someone is physically attacking restoration crews. He did not claim that last part as fact. He said it was possible. Berlin then reported an attack on a restoration crew vehicle, rocks thrown, then a gunshot, then the crew retreating. The firefighter woman said her department was now escorting crews with armed police when possible. That is what it takes when the problem shifts from engineering to conflict. My own conflict came when 2 men approached our gate in daylight, no vests, hands visible, asking for water. I saw them through a crack in the covered window. He looked young, thin, sweating. The older man looked more controlled, scanning. I did not open the door. I did not shout either. I spoke through the closed door, telling him we could not help and that he should go to community points in the city. The younger man begged. The older man's tone sharpened. He said he knew we had power. He said he could hear the generator. That meant our silence had limits. Sound travels, smell travels. Rumor travels fastest. I told him again no. I told him we would call emergency services if he needed medical assistance. He laughed at that. He told the younger man to step back. Then he left. No violence, no threat. Still, it felt like a warning. He learned our position. He could return with friends. That night, I moved the generator to a quieter mode by reducing load further and adjusting the ventilation path to muffle sound. I also took a step I hated. I prepared for a full shutoff and relocation plan. If our site became a target, staying would get people hurt. We identified 2 fallback locations, both in industrial zones, with fewer sightlines. One a smaller storage unit owned by a friend of Marieke. One a concrete service tunnel access point that Samir knew from a previous job. We packed essentials into crates. Water, first aid, batteries, tools, paper notes, maps. We did not move yet. We prepared. Preparation is the only control you have when the outside world goes unpredictable. Chris in Boston described something that matched our gate visitors. He said generator sound had become a lure. People were listening for it at night, walking streets quiet enough to hear engines, then marking buildings that had power. He said some buildings were attacked only for fuel. Some were attacked to disable power so nobody else could use it. He said the second category scared him more. He said it felt personal, spiteful, designed to make everyone suffer equally. Berlin reported the same, small groups vandalizing working generators in apartment courtyards. Paris reported men cutting extension cords used for community charging points. It was not only theft, it was leveling. The guard voice, still on when he could be, said something that gave me one practical anchor. He said official services were trying to establish stable resilience corridors, routes with protected infrastructure nodes, guarded water distribution, and protected medical points. He did not promise success. He said the effort was uneven and depended on manpower. He said civilians should not expect a quick return of normal communications or payment systems. He said cash and barter were already taking over. He said transportation logistics were degraded and spare parts were becoming a constraint. He said a blackout is also a supply chain collapse because every fuel pump, every warehouse management server, every distribution center depends on stable power and network coordination. Listening to that from someone in uniform made my own warehouse feel painfully relevant. I was living the front edge of that truth. On day 7, the radio traffic thinned. Batteries died. People withdrew, some voices vanished without explanation. A few new voices appeared, mostly operators with solar, generators, or carefully conserved power. Patrick stayed on. Chris stayed on. The firefighter woman stayed on when she could. I stayed on in shorter bursts because I needed to protect my site. I started logging reports on paper with time and source. I wrote in words, not numbers, because I was reading it aloud later for verification. Tuesday night, around 2 a.m, reflective vest, intrusion attempt at industrial site in Netherlands, fence cut. Wednesday morning, Boston reports printed checkpoint notices. Thursday evening, Berlin reports generator sabotage at clinic. The paper log became my anchor. If someone tried to rewrite reality later, paper would still say what we heard in the moment. The most honest thing I can tell you right now is that the biggest catastrophe was not one explosion or one riot. It was the steady loss of shared reference points. No reliable news, no trusted official voice, no payment systems, no quick verification. In that vacuum, organized groups gained power because he who controls information and distribution controls behavior. In my own small world, routine and rules kept people from turning on each other. Across cities, the same principle applied, but at a scale that demanded manpower, legitimacy, and trust. When those were missing, fear filled the gap. That is where the printed notices mattered. That is where the smooth voice ordering silence mattered. Those were not random. Those were attempts to replace trust with obedience. So I started treating information the same way I treat inventory. If I cannot verify, I do not ship it. I log it, I flag it, I wait for a second independent report. That sounds cold, but cold is what keeps a person from making dumb moves when everything is emotional. In the first week, the channel was full of panic stories. By day 8, the channel had fewer voices, and the voices left were either stubborn, prepared, or both. Chris in Boston stayed on. Patrick in Dublin stayed on. The Berlin firefighter woman stayed on when her station generator had fuel. A few utility contractors stayed on, speaking in plain language, sounding exhausted. I stayed on in short bursts because broadcasting too much makes a location interesting, and I had already learned we were being watched. Day 8 started with a real catastrophe in our own region that had nothing to do with rumors. A cargo vessel at the port had drifted during a maneuver because tug coordination broke down when comms failed. The report came from the port security voice, and he sounded shaken. He said the ship clipped a dock structure and tore open a fuel line assembly on the pier. Diesel spilled, then something caught. He said flames were visible from miles away, and the smoke plume was thick and black. He said firefighters were fighting with limited pressure and relying on portable pumps. He said the fire spread to stored materials and set off small explosions from pressurized cylinders used in yard equipment. That one incident hit a nerve in me, because it was the exact kind of accident modern systems prevent by default. In darkness, the old risks come back fast. The port fire changed behavior in the city. People saw smoke and assumed the worst. Some thought it was an attack. Some thought it was a refinery going. The truth was almost more frightening because it was normal human error in a broken coordination environment. When the port fire went up, Rotterdam traffic shifted again. More people tried to leave. More people tried to reach family. More people started moving supplies into apartment stairwells. My girlfriend told me she was hearing building meetings in the evening where residents argued about who controls the front door. That sounds petty until you live it. Front doors become borders when people are hungry. Inside our warehouse, the border became the generator room. That engine was our heart, and we were down to under half a tank. I started planning for the moment it dies, not as a dramatic end, but as a controlled transition. We built a battery-only mode for the radio. We scavenged every rechargeable power pack from cars in the lot, checked which ones actually held charge, and labeled them on cardboard with marker. We set a strict charging schedule. One device at a time, 15 minutes, then off. It made some people angry, which told me he was still thinking in normal life terms. Normal life had ended for the week at least. We also had to deal with the fact that our building could not stay invisible forever. On the 9th day, a group showed up again at the gate in daylight. Larger this time, 5 men. No vests this time. Clean boots, shaved faces, calm movements. One man stood back and watched the building, not the gate. Another man approached the door and knocked hard, not a timid knock. He did not ask politely. He announced that he was organizing aid distribution and needed to inspect facilities with power. He said it in Dutch and then in English. He did not name a municipal department. He did not show ID. He did not offer verification. I did not open the door. I did not shout either. I spoke through the closed door in a firm voice and asked one question. Who sent you and where can I verify it right now? The man answered with irritation. He said verification was not available because communications were down, and he said I should cooperate for the good of the area. That sentence told me everything. If a person has real authority, he provides a chain. He provides names. He provides a procedure. He does not rely on vague moral pressure. I told him no. I told him this was private property and there were no inspections. I told him to leave. The men did not leave immediately. The watcher kept watching, eyes scanning the door seams, roofline, the vent panels we had already secured. The speaker took a step back and said, "Calm now. If you do not cooperate, you will be treated as a hoarder." He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten directly. He framed it as social punishment, which is smarter than a threat in a crowd. Then he left. The group walked away together, not scattered. That detail mattered. Opportunists scatter. A team stays tight. The moment the group was out of sight, I made the call we had been avoiding. We were moving. Not later, not tomorrow. Now, before we got labeled publicly and before a bigger crowd came back. A warehouse is a big target. It is too visible, too well known. In a blacked out region, everyone knows where warehouses are. People work in them, drive past them, talk about them. Our fallback was the smaller storage unit Marieke had access to, on the edge of an industrial estate with fewer passers-by and more fenced lots. Smaller meant less inventory to protect, less noise, less heat signature, fewer reasons for anyone to care. We did not do a chaotic evacuation. We did it like a shift change, structured, assigned. 2 vans, 1 pickup truck, and anyone without a vehicle rode in the warehouse van in tight seating. We took only essentials: water, first aid, batteries, tools, blankets, paper logs, a few boxes of shelf-stable food we had, and the radio cabinet equipment that could be moved without destroying it. We shut the generator down on purpose before leaving, so we did not advertise. We locked doors, barred what we could, and wrote a simple note inside the door for any late returning employee with a contact point. No address, just a direction and a time window to listen for us on the channel. We moved in late afternoon because the roads at night were worse, and because daylight still gave us a chance to see trouble early. We drove with headlights off when we could and on when we had to. The city streets felt different now. More abandoned cars, more burned trash piles, more people standing in groups at corners watching vehicles pass. Not everyone was hostile, but the density of eyes made you feel exposed. We avoided main roads and took service lanes along canals and warehouses. We had one near miss at a checkpoint that was set up with cones and a van across a narrow lane. We turned around before we reached it. No debate, no testing. We took the longer route. At the new storage unit, the building was small, concrete, with a roller door and a side door. It smelled stale and oily, the normal smell of an industrial unit that stores pallets and tools. It had no big windows. That was good. It had a roofline that did not stand out. That was also good. We unloaded in silence. No shouting, no slamming doors. We covered any interior light spill, We set up sleeping spaces in one corner and kept the radio gear in the far corner away from the door. We established watch points again. One person at the side door, one person near the roller door, one person near the back wall listening for any cutting or digging. It felt extreme until you remember someone already tried to take our generator. Then we hit the next layer of catastrophe: sanitation. By the second week, sewage lift stations failing meant neighborhoods smelled different. You could taste it in the air in some areas when the wind shifted. The Berlin firefighter woman reported outbreaks of stomach illness because people were drinking untreated water or using contaminated containers. Montreal reported carbon monoxide deaths from people running generators in enclosed spaces to stay warm. London reported a high-rise fire started by candles and could not be fought effectively because water pressure was inconsistent and access was blocked by crowds. Boston reported a major hospital had to evacuate critical patients when a backup generator failed due to contaminated fuel. None of these were big attack stories. These were system collapse stories, the kind that grind a city down without a single headline. Chris in Boston said the worst part was the quiet lies that spread when people wanted comfort. He said someone in his neighborhood started claiming the federal government will restore power by Friday. He said that claim was based on nothing but hope. He said people made plans around it, and when Friday came and nothing changed, the mood turned violent. That matched what I was seeing too. People can endure hardship if expectations are honest. People break when hope is used as a weapon. Patrick in Dublin started compiling a rough timeline using what he could cross-check. He called it a pattern log, not a conspiracy. He noted that in both Europe and North America, the blackout hit in a narrow time window, followed by targeted telecom cabinet fires, followed by attacks on backup generators, followed by the emergence of aid organizers with printed notices and roadblocks. He said it could be multiple groups exploiting a shared playbook. He said it could be coordinated. He said the only safe assumption was that someone had studied infrastructure dependencies and had enough people to hit multiple nodes quickly. That sounded right. It also meant we should not assume the worst possible mastermind. We should assume a capable hostile network and plan around what such a network can do. In our new unit, the first 2 nights were calm. That made me uneasy. Calm in a collapse is not peace. Calm can be the pause before a search pattern reaches you. We kept our radio time limited. We broadcast short updates and then went silent. We did not use the generator at all. We relied on batteries and power packs, and we conserved hard. That meant cold nights and dim light. But it also meant no engine sound. My girlfriend took on a role that surprised me. She started doing neighbor-style organizing inside our group, checking on the quiet people, keeping the water ration fair, keeping emotions from boiling into conflict. A group breaks faster from internal resentment than from external pressure. She understood that without me asking. The outside world did not stay calm. On day 12, we heard multiple independent reports of a major chemical incident near the Ruhr area in Germany. A utility contractor and a trucker both described a plant flaring bright with sustained fire, then a plume that drifted low. The Berlin firefighter woman said crews were stretched, and mutual aid was limited because fuel shortages meant fewer vehicles could move long distance. A man from near Dortmund said people were being told to shelter inside and seal windows, but most people did not have official guidance that they trusted. That last part was the poison. When people do not trust guidance, they do random things, and random things increase casualties. The same day, Boston reported a water treatment disruption. The guard voice said a pump station had been sabotaged, and now sections of the city were under boil water advisories. But with no power, boiling was hard. He said distribution of bottled water was being attempted, but crowds were forming and crowds were becoming dangerous. He said his unit had to fire warning shots into the air to break up a rush at a truck. He did not sound proud. He sounded sick about it. That is another collapse layer. The state using force not to control politics, but to stop people from crushing each other in a panic. On day 13, the smooth voice returned on our channel again, and this time it tried to imitate local voices. He used Dutch phrases with a decent accent. He said municipal coordination and emergency allocation. He offered a meeting point near a location that sounded plausible. Then Patrick jumped in and said that location did not match any official distribution he could confirm, and that the voice had no verifiable authority. Chris in Boston said he heard the same voice earlier offering safe transport out of the city. The voice vanished again. That pattern became clear. Misinformation campaigns were actively moving people. If you can make people gather at specific points, you can control, recruit, rob, or eliminate. Even if only a small percentage believes it, it is enough to cause harm. We made another decision after that. We stopped letting anyone in. It sounded cruel, but it was survival. If we let in one desperate stranger, we risked letting in a scout, a thief, or someone followed. We created a protocol anyway, because rules reduce guilt. If someone knocked, we would listen. We would respond through the door. We would offer one thing only: basic verbal directions to the nearest confirmed public aid point if we had one, and nothing else. No water, no food, no entry. It was hard to say out loud. Saying it out loud made it possible to enforce without argument. The knock came the next morning. A woman with a child, voice shaking, asking for water. My girlfriend's face tightened when she heard it. Fareed looked away. Samir's jaw clenched. I went to the door and listened for a second voice. Footsteps, radios, anything. I heard only the woman and the child. That did not mean there was nobody else. I responded through the door in a calm voice and gave the direction to a church where we had heard a verified local aid group was distributing boiled water from a large tank using a wood-fired setup. I told her to go in daylight, to avoid crowds, to keep moving. She begged. I told her again. She cried. Then she left. I stood there with my hand on the door, feeling the weight of what we were becoming. Not monsters, just people who could not afford mercy without structure. Later that day, we heard on the channel that an aid point in Rotterdam had turned into a trap. A man reported he went to a promised distribution site near an industrial underpass and found armed men controlling the line, taking phones, separating people, taking bags. He escaped when the crowd surged. He said he saw a teenager dragged behind a van. He said he did not know if the teenager was alive. He said he was telling us so we would stop believing any promise that came without verification. That report made my earlier refusal feel less cruel and more correct. If someone can lure people with water, the safest place becomes a moving target. By the third week, the catastrophe shifted again. It became about fuel and winter, even though it was not deep winter yet. Nights in the Netherlands can drop into the low 40s Fahrenheit, sometimes colder, and damp makes it feel worse. Without heating, people got sick. Without pharmacies operating normally, small infections became big. Berlin reported hospitals running out of certain antibiotics. Boston reported insulin shortages and refrigerated medication spoiling. Montreal reported hypothermia deaths among older residents in high-rise apartments with no heat. These were not dramatic in the movie sense. These were slow and deadly in the real sense. Our group started doing small scavenging runs, controlled and short. 2 people at a time, daylight only, back within 1 hour. We targeted boring items, water containers, medical supplies, batteries, hand tools, canned food. We avoided supermarkets. Supermarkets became violence zones. We went to small hardware stores and small office buildings. We found a box of paper filters in one place and treated it as treasure. We found a roll of heavy mesh and reinforced our vents. We found a manual hand pump that could move water from a container without electricity. We found a first aid manual and kept it. It sounds simple. In a collapse, simple tools become infrastructure. Chris in Boston started describing something that bothered me because it was human, not technical. He said people began splitting into story camps. One camp said this was an accident, the grid failed, bad luck. Another camp said foreign attack. Another camp said internal coup. Another camp said divine punishment. Chris said those stories were becoming reasons to hurt each other. He said he watched a man get beaten because someone accused him of being one of them with no proof. That matched the danger I had been warning about. When reference points die, humans replace them with blame, and blame makes people stupid and violent. I challenged the group inside our unit too, quietly. When someone started saying he knew who did it, I asked him what evidence he had beyond rumor. He got angry at me. I stayed calm and told him anger was not evidence. I told him we could plan for hostile, organized actors without deciding on a fairy tale villain. That matters because a false certainty can push a group into reckless choices, and reckless choices get people killed. We needed discipline. We needed humility. We needed to accept uncertainty while still acting. The biggest new development came on day 21, when the guard voice in Massachusetts came on with a shorter, harsher tone. He said large parts of the eastern United States were now operating in islands, with critical infrastructure prioritized and civilian areas left dark. He said restoration teams were being protected by armed escorts because sabotage attempts continued. He said some attacks looked copycat and some looked trained. He said the federal response was stretched because Europe was also degraded, meaning international support and spare parts flow were limited. He said something else that hit hard. Replacement transformer logistics are not happening at scale. Factories are not producing at normal output. Transport is compromised. This is not a 2-week problem. He said civilians needed to plan for months. That month's word changed behavior on our channel. People stopped asking, when does power come back? People started asking, where do I go where water is stable? People started talking about moving to rural areas, but rural areas were not immune. Rural areas have fewer police, fewer medical services, fewer resources, and long supply chains. If the supply chain dies, rural becomes harsh fast. Patrick warned against mass rural flight. He said it would overload small towns and create conflict. He said cities were dangerous. But cities also had infrastructure density that could recover in pockets. He said the best plan was local resilience, not blind migration. In Rotterdam, the port fire had long since burned out, but the port itself was not recovering cleanly. A port operator came on and said cranes were still down in sections. He said refrigerated containers of food had spoiled and were being dumped, and that created disease risk. He said security was now partly handled by private contractors because official manpower was stretched. He said access was controlled by new rules, and rules change daily. That is a sign of unstable governance. Not absence of governance, unstable governance, which is sometimes worse because it makes planning impossible. Our own drama arrived in a practical form. A person from our old warehouse showed up at the storage unit door late afternoon, alone, exhausted, carrying a small bag. It was one of my employees who had left during the early days, a young man named Youre. He knew the address because he had worked with Marieke before. He said his apartment building was taken over by an organizing committee that demanded payments in food for security. He said he refused. He said he got beaten. He lifted his shirt and showed bruises. No gore, just the ugly colors of violence. He said he had nowhere else. He begged to stay. This was the moment where rules met reality. We had a no-entry rule. Now a known person stood outside, injured, desperate. My girlfriend looked at me and did not speak, but her face said she could not watch us turn him away. Samir said quietly that taking him in risked the whole group if he was followed. Marieke said Youre was real, and she had worked with him, and she believed him. Farid said nothing, staring at the floor. I made a compromise that felt terrible but necessary. We let Youre in, but we did it under quarantine rules. We searched his bag. We checked him for any hidden radios. We checked the street for anyone watching before opening. We closed and secured the door fast. We placed him in a separate corner behind a makeshift barrier for the first night. We cleaned his wounds. We gave him water and food. We told him the truth. If anyone came looking for him, we would not fight a war for pride. We would move again. He nodded and cried quietly, not loud, just a few breaths. That was the sound of a person realizing safety now comes with conditions. That night, the smooth voice returned again, and this time it did not command. It offered a deal. It said, voluntary registration ensures protection and access to supplies. Non-registered locations will be subject to inspection. It said it in English, then German, then French. It sounded like a policy statement. It sounded like someone testing compliance. Patrick called it what it was. Coercion language. Chris said Boston had heard similar messages in neighborhoods, printed leaflets, and loudspeaker announcements from vehicles with no official markings. If you are listening, understand the trick. Voluntary registration in a collapse is not about helping you. It is about mapping you. A map lets someone decide who gets fuel, who gets water, who gets controlled, who gets removed. That does not require a single evil mastermind. It requires a network that wants leverage. The lever is distribution. We started preparing to leave the city region entirely, not because rural is magic, but because our location was becoming known through too many human links. The more people who know where you are, the more likely someone hostile will know too. We did not talk about it loudly. We planned quietly. We identified a route that avoided major bridges and avoided known checkpoints. We identified 2 intermediate safe stops. One an abandoned office park Marieke knew, one a small maintenance yard Samir had used years ago. We collected fuel in small amounts from abandoned vehicles, siphoned carefully, filtered through cloth to remove debris. We did not take everything. We took enough to move. We also made a moral decision that I need to say out loud because pretending it did not happen would be dishonest. We stopped trying to save the world. We focused on saving our group. That does not mean we became cruel. It means we became selective. We avoided crowds. We avoided fights. We avoided showing resources. We did not announce ourselves as a shelter. We did not become a public aid point. Public aid points were becoming traps, whether by predators or by desperate crushes. The night before we planned to move, we heard gunfire nearby, close enough that the sound hit the walls and made everyone flinch. Not one shot, multiple. Then a car engine screaming, then silence. We killed our lights and stayed still for 20 minutes. Then we heard footfalls outside fast, and a voice shouting in Dutch. Then a thump against the roller door, not hard enough to dent it, more like someone fell into it. My girlfriend squeezed my arm hard, and I could feel her hand shaking. Samir positioned himself at the side door with a metal bar. Marieke held a flashlight but kept it off. Someone knocked on the roller door and said, breathless, "Open, please, please." Male voice, young. Then the voice changed tone fast and said, "Open the door now." That second sentence had no panic. It had control. It sounded rehearsed. I did not open. I did not answer. After a minute, we heard a scraping sound near the bottom edge of the roller door, maybe a tool testing the seam. Then the sound stopped. Then footsteps moved away. We waited. We stayed silent. Then we heard a vehicle outside, idling, then moving. The next morning, we found a chalk mark on the concrete near our side door. A simple symbol, not random. It looked like a locator mark. That was enough. We moved that day earlier than planned, because once a place is marked, time is against you. I am telling you this not for drama, but for pattern recognition. Marking is a tactic. It is used in theft rings. It is used in organized street control. It is used in conflict zones. It means someone wants to return, possibly with manpower. If you see marks appear near your building after strangers scout, take it seriously. Clean the marks, change your routine. Move if you can. We left in a small convoy of 2 vehicles, low profile, no shouting, no horns. We carried what we could. We left behind everything that made noise or light. We avoided main roads. We passed burned intersections where traffic lights hung dead. We passed a distribution point turned into a fenced camp with armed guards. We did not stop to watch. We passed a bridge approach where men in work jackets stood with radios. And we turned off early and took a service road along a canal. We drove slow because a crash ends you now. No tow service is coming, no insurance is coming, no clean rescue. As we drove, Patrick in Dublin stayed on the channel and gave short, safe logic updates. He told people to move in daylight if moving at all. He told people to avoid advertised aid points, unless verified by multiple independent sources. He told people to keep written logs. He told people to preserve batteries and stop chasing rumors. Chris in Boston said his rooftop signal might die soon because his batteries were failing and he could not recharge safely anymore. He said he was going to keep talking until he could not. If you're still hearing me, understand this part. The blackout is not only an outage, it is a contest over who gets to define reality when reality cannot be checked. It is also a contest over who controls water, fuel, medicine, and movement. In the first week, you can survive by hiding and rationing. In the second and third week, you survive by staying uninteresting, staying mobile when marked, and staying disciplined about what you believe. Every time you repeat a rumor as fact, you give power to whoever is shaping rumors. Every time you gather at an unverified point, you become manageable. I do not know where this ends. I do not have a secret briefing. I am a warehouse manager who got stuck behind a microphone when the world went dark, and I learned fast that the most dangerous weapon in a collapse is not a rifle. It is a convincing voice with no verification. That voice tells you to shut up, or to gather, or to register, or to trust the wrong person. Do not give that voice your obedience, just because it sounds calm. We are on the road now, moving away from Rotterdam's industrial spine, aiming for a place with fewer eyes and fewer organized crews, a place where local community still exists and where water sources are not entirely dependent on electric pumps. We are not naive. Rural can be harsh. Rural can be violent. Still, the density of predatory organization in the city corridors is rising, and we were marked. Marked means hunted sooner or later. I will keep broadcasting in short windows when safe. If you hear me again, it means we are still moving, still alive, still refusing to be isolated. If you do not hear me, do not assume death. Assume battery. Assume silence for safety. The world is different now. Silence is sometimes the smartest thing a person can do.